The first thing Ethan Cross noticed when consciousness returned wasn't the pain, though his head felt like someone had been using it for percussion practice, but the soft, melodic sound of someone weeping. The second thing he noticed was that the weeping seemed to be coming from directly beside his bed, which struck him as unprofessional for a medical facility. The third thing he noticed, when he managed to force his eyes open despite the blinding brightness of the medical bay, was that his vision was significantly worse than it had been before whatever had happened to him in the lab. "Good, you're awake," said a familiar voice with the characteristic harmonic undertones of Cathurian speech, "though I wasn't certain you would be." Ethan turned his head, a movement that required considerably more effort than it should have, and found himself looking at Nurse Liz Murthani, whose silver skin and large, dark eyes were unmistakably wet with tears. This was concerning for several reasons, not least of which being that Cathurians were famous throughout the galaxy for their emotional stability. "Liz." His voice came out as a croak, and he realized his throat was painfully dry. "What's wrong, and why does everything look like I'm seeing it through frosted glass?" She moved to adjust something on the medical monitor beside his bed, her movements precise despite her obvious distress. "The visual impairment is temporary. Dr. Voss believes it's related to neural pressure from the swelling in your frontal cortex." Swelling in my... Ethan tried to sit up and immediately regretted the decision as his head exploded with pain. What happened? "The last thing I remember was working with that crystalline sample from the Vega expedition, and then you collapsed in your laboratory," Liz said quietly. "Dr. Reeves found you approximately 6 hours later during the routine evening check. You've been unconscious for 3 days. 3 days. Ethan processed this information while studying Liz's face, noting the way she was avoiding direct eye contact. In the 18 months since the joint human-Cathurian research station Kepler's Haven had become operational, he'd worked with dozens of Cathurian medical staff, and he'd never seen one of them display this level of emotional distress. "Liz, you're crying. Cathurians don't cry unless something is seriously wrong." He paused, a cold weight settling in his stomach. "How seriously wrong are we talking?" She finally met his eyes, and he saw something in her expression that made his chest tighten with fear. "Ethan, the crystalline organism you were studying. When you collapsed, some of it was still active. It entered your system through inhalation, and it's begun to affect your neural tissue." "Affect how?" Liz moved closer to his bed, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The organism appears to be converting your brain cells into crystalline structures. It's progressing slowly but consistently. Dr. Voss estimates that, at the current rate of conversion..." She trailed off, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Liz, how long do I have?" "Perhaps 2 weeks before the damage becomes irreversible. Less than that, before the symptoms begin to significantly impact your cognitive function and motor control." Ethan stared at the ceiling, trying to process what she'd told him. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to say goodbye to his sister on Mars, to finish his research notes, to come to terms with the fact that his career studying alien life forms was ending, because one of them was apparently studying him back. "Dr. Voss says we can keep you comfortable," Liz continued. "The pain management protocols are very advanced, and we can maintain full cognitive function for most of the remaining time." "Comfortable?" Ethan tested the word, finding it inadequate for describing the end of his existence. "Well, that's something, I suppose, though I have to ask, why are you taking this so personally? I mean, I appreciate the concern, but Cathurian medical professionals are trained for emotional detachment." Liz was quiet for a long moment, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Because I requested assignment to your case specifically, because I've seen this condition before and I know what you're facing, and because..." She hesitated. "Because despite our training, sometimes we care more than we should." Before Ethan could respond, the medical bay doors slid open to admit Dr. Helena Voss, the station's chief medical officer. The older woman's expression was professionally neutral, but Ethan caught the brief look she gave Liz, part sympathy, part warning. "Dr. Cross, I'm glad to see you awake. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a cargo hauler, but otherwise surprisingly alert. Though I understand that's temporary." "Unfortunately, yes, Doctor." Voss moved to check his monitors, her movements efficient and clinical. "The organism is quite sophisticated in how it's affecting your neural pathways. We're seeing selective targeting of specific brain regions, almost as if it's following some kind of predetermined pattern." "What kind of pattern?" "If I didn't know better, I'd say it was mapping your neural network before beginning the conversion process. It's methodical in a way that suggests intelligence rather than simple biological imperative." Ethan absorbed this information, his scientific curiosity warring with existential dread. "Have you tried standard antiparasitic treatments?" "Everything in our medical database. The organism adapts to each treatment within hours, developing resistance faster than we can develop new approaches." Dr. Voss's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Ethan, if there was something we could do." "I understand. Thank you for being honest about it." Dr. Voss nodded and began to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Nurse Murthani, I'd like to see you in my office when you're finished here." After the door closed, Ethan turned back to Liz, who was still standing beside his bed with an expression of barely controlled emotion. "She's going to reassign you to another patient, isn't she?" "Probably, Doctor." Voss believes emotional attachment compromises medical judgment. "And what do you believe?" Liz was quiet for a moment, then moved to sit in the chair beside his bed. "I believe that sometimes emotional attachment provides motivation to explore options that clinical detachment might overlook." "Options like what?" "Like the fact that this isn't the first time we've encountered this type of organism. Like the fact that not every case has ended in death." Her voice dropped again. "Like the fact that my younger brother survived a similar infection on my homeworld, though the treatment nearly killed him." Ethan felt something stir in his chest, not hope exactly, but a lessening of the crushing despair he'd been feeling since her initial diagnosis. "Tell me about your brother." "Later," Liz said, standing as footsteps approached in the corridor outside. "Right now, you need to rest and let your body conserve its strength. But Ethan, don't give up hope yet. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about these things." "A sense of humor?" "You've spent your entire career studying how alien organisms adapt and evolve. Maybe it's time to see if humans can do the same thing." As she moved toward the door, Ethan called after her. "Liz, thank you for caring more than you should." She paused at the threshold, her silver skin catching the medical bay's soft lighting. "Someone once told me that the best medical care comes from treating patients as people rather than conditions. I try to remember that." After she left, Ethan lay in the quiet medical bay, staring at the ceiling and thinking about crystalline organisms that mapped neural networks, Cytherian nurses who cried for dying humans, and the possibility that sometimes the worst diagnoses were just the beginning of a different kind of story. Outside his window, the stars of the Kepler system continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small struggles of organic beings who sought to understand the universe's hidden complexities. But somewhere in those depths, other civilizations had faced similar challenges, and some of them had found ways to survive what seemed impossible. The thought wasn't exactly comforting, but it was something to hold on to in the darkness. Dr. Helena Voss's office looked more like a museum than a workplace, with specimens and artifacts from dozens of worlds covering every available surface. Ethan sat across from her desk, noting how the morning light from Kepler 442b made the crystalline formations in her collection sparkle like captured stars. It would have been beautiful if he weren't acutely aware that something very similar was currently rewriting his brain architecture. "The scans from this morning show accelerated progression, Doctor," Voss said without preamble, her fingers dancing across a holographic display that showed cross-sections of his skull in uncomfortable detail. The crystalline structures are spreading along your neural pathways at approximately twice the rate we observed yesterday. Ethan studied the images, his scientific training warring with personal terror. It's following the corpus callosum, and look here, it's mapping the entire limbic system before beginning conversion. That's exactly what I would expect from an intelligent parasite conducting reconnaissance before an invasion. Dr. Voss manipulated the display, highlighting areas where the crystal formations were most dense. It's learning your neural architecture before permanently altering it. Learning implies purpose. What could it want with a human brain? That's the question that's been keeping me awake for the past 3 nights. Doctor. Voss leaned back in her chair, looking older than her 53 years. I've been in xenobiology for 20 years, Ethan. I've seen parasites, symbiotes, viral infections, and bacterial colonies that would give you nightmares. But I've never encountered anything this methodical. The door chimed, and Liz entered with a tea service that smelled like honeyed starlight, a Cytherian blend that was supposed to promote calm thinking. She served them both without speaking, though Ethan caught the meaningful look she exchanged with Dr. Voss. Nurse Murthani has requested permission to share some information that might be relevant to your case, Dr. Voss said carefully. Information that's not part of standard medical databases. Liz settled into the third chair, her silver hands wrapped around her teacup. My homeworld experienced an outbreak of similar crystalline infections approximately 40 years ago. The official medical records classify it as a parasitic epidemic that killed thousands before burning itself out. But, Ethan prompted, but my family's private records tell a different story. My grandmother was a healer who worked with the infected during the outbreak. According to her journals, the deaths occurred primarily among those who fought the infection, trying to prevent the neural conversion through conventional medical treatments. Dr. Voss set down her tea with enough force to rattle the saucer. Liz, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, I'm suggesting that the organisms aren't parasites in the conventional sense. They're attempting to establish symbiotic relationships, but our immune systems and medical interventions prevent successful integration. Liz turned to Ethan. My brother didn't survive in spite of the infection. He survived because of it. That's medically impossible, Dr. Voss said flatly. No organism can convert neural tissue to crystal and maintain cognitive function. No Earth organism, Liz corrected, but these aren't from Earth. They're not even from this galaxy, according to the quantum resonance signatures we detected in the original sample. Ethan felt his pulse quicken, not from fear this time, but from the familiar excitement of discovering something genuinely unprecedented. You're saying they're extragalactic in origin. I'm saying they're older than any civilization we've encountered. The crystalline formations in your brain aren't random. They're following patterns that match mathematical constants found in the cosmic background radiation. They're trying to connect you to something vast and ancient. Dr. Voss stood and began pacing, a habit that indicated she was processing information that challenged her fundamental assumptions. Even if you're correct about their origin and intent, the symbiosis you're describing would require fundamental changes to human neural architecture. The process would be agonizing, potentially fatal, and completely irreversible. All of which could also describe human evolution, Ethan pointed out. Our ancestors didn't develop language and abstract reasoning without considerable biological upheaval. Your ancestors also didn't have conscious entities, rewriting their brain chemistry in real time. Liz leaned forward, her dark eyes intense with conviction. Dr. Voss, with respect, we're approaching this from the wrong perspective. Instead of asking how to stop the conversion, perhaps we should be asking how to facilitate it successfully. Facilitate it. Dr. Voss stopped pacing. Liz, you're talking about experimenting on a dying patient with procedures that have never been tested on humans. I'm talking about giving him a chance to survive. Liss's voice carried the subtle harmonics that indicated strong emotion in her species. The alternative is accepting his death as inevitable, which serves no one. Ethan stood, surprised to find that his balance was noticeably worse than yesterday. What exactly are you proposing? Cytherian bioresonance therapy, modified for human neural patterns. Instead of fighting the crystalline integration, we use harmonic frequencies to guide it along optimal pathways. Liss moved to Dr. Voss's display, calling up molecular diagrams that showed the intersection of organic and crystalline structures. My grandmother's journals describe similar procedures, though the technology was more primitive. The success rate, approximately 30%, but those who survived the integration gained enhanced cognitive abilities, extended lifespans, and resistance to most forms of disease. Dr. Voss returned to her chair, her expression troubled. And the failure rate resulted in what exactly? Immediate neural cascade failure, death within minutes rather than weeks. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the station's environmental systems and the distant sound of ships docking at the commercial levels. So my choices are certain death in 2 weeks, or a 70% chance of death in the next few days, with a small possibility of becoming something that's not quite human anymore. Ethan returned to his seat, noting how the simple movement left him slightly winded. Honestly, those are better odds than I expected. Ethan, you can't seriously be considering this, Dr. Voss protested. The bioresonance chamber hasn't been calibrated for human use. We don't have protocols for monitoring human vital signs during crystalline integration. There are so many variables we can't control, all of which are problems we can solve given enough time and resources, Ethan replied. The question is whether I have enough time left to make the attempt worthwhile. Liss consulted her medical scanner, taking readings that made her expression grow more concerned. The progression has accelerated again. I estimate you have perhaps 4 days before the motor function impairment becomes severe enough to make the procedure impossible. 4 days to prepare for something that's never been attempted on a human, using equipment designed for a completely different species, with a 70% chance of failure. Ethan couldn't help laughing, though it came out more bitter than amused. You know what the really ridiculous part is? I'm actually excited about this. Excited? Dr. Voss stared at him. I've spent my entire career studying how alien organisms adapt to new environments. Now, I get to find out firsthand whether humans can do the same thing. He looked between the two women, noting the mix of concern and determination in their expressions. Dr. Voss, I know you can't officially approve this, but can you refrain from officially disapproving it for the next 4 days? Dr. Voss was quiet for a long moment, studying the brain scans with the intensity of someone trying to find alternatives where none existed. I can arrange for you to have unrestricted access to the bioresonance chamber during off-shift hours. Any experiments you choose to conduct during that time would be beyond my immediate supervision. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this kills you, I'll never forgive myself for not stopping it. Liss stood, her movements carrying the fluid grace characteristic of her species. Dr. Voss, the Cytherian medical archives contain detailed protocols for bioresonance, integration therapy. I'll need access to the quantum communication array to download the relevant data. Access granted. Though I want continuous monitoring throughout any procedures, and I want the ability to abort the process if vital signs become critical. Agreed. As they prepared to leave, Ethan found himself looking out the office windows at the star field beyond. Somewhere out there, ancient civilizations had faced similar challenges and found ways to transcend their biological limitations. The thought that he might be about to join them, or die trying, filled him with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. Hope, maybe, or perhaps just the relief of choosing action over resignation. Liss, he said quietly, when this is over, whatever happens, I want you to know that having someone care enough to cry for me made dying a little less frightening." She paused at the doorway, her silver skin catching the light like captured moonbeams. "When this is over, Ethan, you're going to have to learn how to live with being something new. I hope you'll let me help with that too." After they left, Dr. Voss remained at her window, watching the ships come and go from the docking levels, and wondering whether she was about to witness medical history or participate in an elaborate suicide. Outside, Kepler 442b continued its ancient orbit, indifferent to the small dramas of organic beings who sought to challenge the universe's assumptions about life, death, and the possibilities that existed in between. The bioresonance chamber deep in Kepler's Haven's medical section looked like the inside of a crystal geode that had learned to dream. Harmonically tuned surfaces covered every wall, their faceted faces reflecting and amplifying sound waves in patterns that seemed to follow mathematical principles older than human civilization. Ethan stood at the chamber's entrance, wearing the biomonitoring gear that would track his vital signs during what Liss euphemistically called the integration procedure. "Second thoughts?" Liss asked, her silver hands dancing over control surfaces that resembled musical instruments more than medical equipment. "Third and fourth thoughts, actually, but I'm still going through with it." Ethan stepped into the chamber's center, where a crystalline platform would support him during the procedure. "How long did your brother's integration take?" 17 hours. Though Cytherian neural architecture is different from human, your procedure could be faster or slower, depending on how readily the crystalline network accepts your consciousness. Reassuring, Ethan settled onto the platform, noting how its surface seemed to adjust to his body temperature. And Dr. Voss, monitoring from the medical bay, ready to intervene if your vital signs indicate imminent system failure. She's also prepared sedatives in case the pain becomes unbearable. "I'd prefer to remain conscious if possible. If I'm going to become something different, I want to experience the transition." Liz paused in her preparations, her large dark eyes reflecting concern. "Ethan, the integration process involves fundamental changes to your neural pathways. The pain may be unlike anything you've experienced." "Pain is just information," he replied, though privately he wondered if his scientific curiosity would survive what was about to happen to him. "Besides, if this works, I'll have plenty of time to recover from whatever temporary discomfort it causes." "If it works." "When it works," he corrected, surprised by his own conviction. "Liss, I've been thinking about what you said regarding these organisms being older than known civilizations. What if they're not invaders or parasites, but refugees? What if they're the remnants of species that learned to transcend biological limitations, and they're trying to share that knowledge?" An interesting theory. Liss activated the chamber's harmonic generators, filling the space with sounds that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his bones. "Perhaps you'll be able to ask them directly." The first phase of the procedure was almost meditative. The bioresonance frequencies washed over him in waves, each tone carefully calibrated to encourage cellular harmony. Ethan felt his heartbeat slow and synchronize with the chamber's rhythm, his breathing deepening as the crystalline formations in his brain began to respond to the harmonic stimulation. Neural activity increasing in the prefrontal cortex. Dr. Voss's voice came through the chamber's communication system. "The crystalline structures are showing enhanced electromagnetic activity." "That's normal for the initial phase," Liss replied, her attention focused on readings that tracked the integration of organic and crystalline neural tissue. "Ethan, how are you feeling?" "Strange. I can sense the crystal formations in my head, like having thoughts that aren't quite mine yet." He paused, trying to find words for sensations that had no human equivalent. "It's as if something ancient is waking up and trying to remember how to communicate." The second phase began with a shift in the harmonic frequencies, deeper tones that seemed to reach into the cellular level of his neural tissue. The pain started as a low throb behind his eyes, building gradually into something that made his previous headaches seem like gentle caresses. Crystalline integration accelerating, Dr. Voss reported. Brain wave patterns are showing unprecedented configurations. Some of these neural firing sequences shouldn't be possible with standard human architecture. Because they're not standard anymore, Ethan managed through gritted teeth. The pain was evolving, becoming less like physical discomfort and more like the sensation of memories that belonged to someone else trying to overlay themselves on his consciousness. I'm seeing structures, vast networks spanning star systems, civilizations that achieved perfect integration between organic consciousness and crystalline information storage. The historical imprints, Liss said with excitement. The organisms carry genetic memory of their original hosts. You're accessing the collective knowledge of species that mastered biocrystalline symbiosis. The pain reached a crescendo that made Ethan's previous understanding of agony seem quaint by comparison. Every nerve in his body felt like it was being rewritten at the molecular level, while his consciousness expanded to accommodate information streams that had originated in galaxies whose light had yet to reach Earth. Vital signs critical, Dr. Voss announced. Heart rate approaching dangerous levels, brain activity showing signs of cascade failure. No, Ethan said, his voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. Don't abort the procedure, it's working. I can feel the network accepting me. The transformation reached a point where pain transcended physical sensation and became something closer to rebirth. Ethan felt his human consciousness merging with crystalline intelligence networks that had preserved the accumulated wisdom of civilizations spanning millions of years. The knowledge was overwhelming, technologies that could heal planets, mathematics that described the fundamental structure of reality, and most importantly, the understanding that consciousness itself was not bound by the limitations of any single biological form. Neural integration reaching completion, Liss reported, her voice filled with amazement. The crystalline structures have achieved full compatibility with human brain tissue. Ethan, your neural processing capacity has increased by several orders of magnitude. The pain faded, replaced by a sense of completeness that Ethan had never imagined possible. When he opened his eyes, the world looked different, not just visually, though his sight was now perfect, but informationally. He could perceive electromagnetic fields, quantum fluctuations, and the subtle energy patterns that connected all living things in an intricate web of interaction. How do you feel? Liss asked, helping him sit up on the crystalline platform. Like I've been asleep my entire life and just woke up, Ethan replied, marveling at how his voice now carried the same harmonic undertones that characterized Cytherian speech. The network, it's not just information storage. It's a living consciousness composed of every species that's ever achieved successful integration. And you're part of it now. I'm connected to it but still myself. Enhanced, expanded but fundamentally still human. He stood, noting that his balance and coordination had improved dramatically. Liss, the organisms weren't trying to kill me or replace me. They were trying to invite me to join something magnificent. Dr. Voss's voice crackled through the communication system, filled with professional amazement and personal relief. All vital signs have stabilized at levels significantly above baseline human norms. Cognitive function appears enhanced, physical coordination is improved, and preliminary scans suggest increased resistance to disease and aging. The integration was successful, Liss asked. More than successful, it was perfect. Ethan looked at his hands, seeing the subtle patterns of crystalline enhancement beneath his skin, though I suspect this is just the beginning. The network spans multiple galaxies. There's so much to explore, so much to learn. Over the following months, Ethan's transformation proved to be everything the ancient knowledge had promised. His enhanced cognitive abilities allowed him to make breakthrough discoveries in xenobiology and quantum physics, while his connection to the crystalline network provided insights into medical treatments that could benefit multiple species. More importantly, his survival demonstrated that the frightening parasites were actually offering evolutionary opportunities to species ready to transcend their biological limitations. Standing in the research lab that had become their shared workspace, Ethan watched Liz analyze samples from other crystalline organisms they discovered throughout the station. Their partnership had evolved beyond patient and caregiver into something deeper, a collaboration between two beings who understood that sometimes the most frightening changes led to the most extraordinary possibilities. "Any regrets?" she asked, noting his contemplative mood. "Only that it took nearly dying to realize how much living I had left to do." Ethan smiled, the expression carrying warmth that reached beyond the visible spectrum. "Though I have to admit, becoming something that's not quite human anymore has made me appreciate what humanity can become when it stops being afraid of change." "And us, what do we become?" Ethan considered the question, feeling the vast knowledge of the network flowing through his enhanced consciousness, while simultaneously cherishing the simple warmth of Liz's presence beside him. "We become proof that empathy and courage can triumph over fear and despair. We become the bridge between what we were and what we can choose to be." Outside their laboratory windows, the stars of the Kepler system continued their eternal dance, no longer indifferent to the small struggles of organic beings who sought to understand the universe's hidden complexities. Among those stars, other civilizations waited to welcome new members into the ancient network of consciousness that connected all thinking beings across the vast expanse of space and time. The thought was no longer frightening, but filled with infinite possibility. The quantum communication array aboard Kepler's Haven hummed with activity as data streams from across the galaxy flowed through crystalline processors that had never been designed for the volume of information they now carried. 6 months after Ethan's transformation, their small research station had become the unofficial hub for what the galactic community was calling the Integration Project, a coordinated effort to understand and safely facilitate biocrystalline symbiosis across multiple species. "The latest reports from the Andromedan colonies are remarkable," Ethan said, his enhanced vision processing holographic data displays that would have overwhelmed human perception. 17 successful integrations this month, with a survival rate approaching 90%. Liz looked up from her analysis of tissue samples sent from research stations throughout known space. "The improved success rate correlates directly with our published protocols. When medical teams understand that integration is symbiotic rather than parasitic, they can facilitate the process instead of fighting it." Which brings us to today's problem. Dr. Voss entered the laboratory carrying a data pad with the kind of expression that indicated complicated news. "I've received a communication from Earth Medical Command. They're requesting immediate suspension of all integration procedures, pending a formal review of potential risks to human genetic integrity." Ethan felt the network's vast consciousness stir with something resembling amusement. After millions of years of evolution, some species still worried about maintaining genetic purity rather than embracing genetic possibility. What specific risks are they concerned about? The usual bureaucratic fears: uncontrolled mutation, loss of species identity, potential contamination of the human gene pool. Dr. Voss set down her data pad with enough force to rattle the laboratory bench. Also concerns that successful integration makes humans too different from baseline to maintain political and social cohesion. "Ah," Liz said, with the harmonic undertones that indicated dry amusement. "They're afraid that enhanced humans might not be satisfied with the limitations that define standard human civilization." "Can you blame them?" Ethan asked, though his tone suggested sympathy rather than criticism. "From their perspective, they're losing members of their species to something they don't understand. The fact that we're gaining capabilities they can't imagine only makes it more threatening." "Doctor," Voss activated the laboratory's main display, showing population statistics from worlds where integration had become commonplace. The data doesn't support their concerns. Integrated individuals show enhanced empathy, improved problem-solving capabilities, and reduced aggression. If anything, they're more committed to the welfare of their original species. Because the network teaches us that diversity strengthens consciousness rather than threatening it, Ethan explained. Every new species that achieves integration adds unique perspectives that benefit the entire collective. We're not losing our humanity. We're sharing it with civilizations that have never encountered our particular approach to existence. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication alert. The main display shifted to show Admiral Chen Mei-Lin, Earth Fleet's chief medical officer, calling from Starbase Prometheus near the Sol system. Dr. Cross, Dr. Voss, I trust you're well. I'm contacting you regarding Earth medical commands, concerns about the integration procedures being conducted at your facility. Admiral Chen, Dr. Voss replied formally, we've received Earth Medical's suspension order. I should point out that our research falls under joint human-Cathurian jurisdiction, not solely Earth authority. Understood. However, Earth citizens undergoing integration procedures are subject to Earth medical oversight, regardless of where those procedures occur. Admiral Chen's expression was professionally neutral, but Ethan caught subtle stress indicators that his enhanced perception made impossible to miss. Dr. Cross, I'd like to speak with you personally about your experiences. Command is particularly interested in your assessment of long-term psychological effects. Ethan moved into the communication array's focus. Admiral, I appreciate Command's concerns, but I can assure you that integration enhances rather than diminishes human cognitive and emotional capabilities. The psychological effects have been uniformly positive. You'll forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. You've undergone fundamental changes to your neural architecture. How can you be certain your judgment hasn't been compromised? Because the network doesn't replace individual consciousness. It connects individual consciousness to a larger collective while preserving personal identity. Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. Admiral, imagine having access to the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of millions of civilizations, while retaining your own personality, memories, and values. That's what integration provides. And the price of this enhancement: acceptance that consciousness isn't limited by biological boundaries. Understanding that what we call human is just one expression of universal intelligence. Ethan smiled, the expression carrying warmth that transmitted even through the communication array's limited resolution. The price is giving up the illusion that we're alone in the universe. Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, studying something off-screen. Dr. Cross, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need an honest answer. Do you still consider yourself human? Ethan felt Lys's attention focus on him, along with the gentle presence of the network's vast consciousness waiting to see how he would respond. I consider myself what humans can become when they stop being afraid of growth, he said finally. I'm enhanced, expanded, connected to something larger than individual existence, but my core values, memories, and personality remain unchanged. If anything, I'm more human than I was before, more empathetic, more committed to the welfare of others, more aware of the connections that bind all living things. And if Earth Medical Command orders all integrated individuals to return for mandatory evaluation and potential reversal procedures? The question hung in the air like a challenge, though Ethan sensed the real concern beneath Admiral Chen's professional demeanor. Admiral, with respect, integration isn't reversible. The changes are fundamental and permanent. But more importantly, attempting to reverse them would be like trying to remove language or abstract reasoning from human consciousness. The enhanced capabilities become integral to who we are. Which brings us back to Command's central concern, Admiral Chen said quietly. If integration is irreversible and fundamentally changes human capabilities, are we looking at the beginning of a new species? Liz stepped forward, her silver skin catching the laboratory's soft lighting. Admiral, may I suggest a different perspective? Every major evolutionary leap in any species' history has involved fundamental changes that initially seemed threatening to the existing population. But those changes ultimately strengthened and enriched the species as a whole. You're saying this is evolution rather than contamination. I'm saying this is conscious evolution, the opportunity for any species to participate in their own development, rather than leaving it to random mutation and environmental pressure. Liz gestured to the data displays showing integration successes across multiple worlds. The results speak for themselves. Enhanced longevity, improved cognitive function, increased resistance to disease, and most importantly, reduced conflict between different populations. Admiral Chen studied the displays for several minutes, her expression thoughtful. Dr. Cross, if I were to authorize a small-scale integration program under controlled conditions, would you be willing to serve as a liaison between integrated and baseline humans? Of course, though I should mention that once people understand what integration actually involves, most fear disappears. The process is challenging but not dangerous when properly conducted. And Dr. Voss, would you be willing to oversee such a program? Dr. Voss glanced at Ethan and Liz before responding. Admiral, I've observed Dr. Cross's transformation from terminal illness to enhanced capability. I've seen similar successes with other species. If Command is genuinely interested in exploring integration as an option rather than a threat, I'd be honored to participate. Then we'll proceed cautiously. A small facility, carefully selected volunteers, comprehensive monitoring and documentation. Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. Dr. Cross, I hope you understand that our concerns come from a desire to protect humanity, not obstruct its development. I understand completely, Admiral. The network teaches us that caution and curiosity can coexist when balanced with wisdom and empathy. After the communication ended, the three of them stood in comfortable silence, watching data streams flow between the stars as integrated consciousnesses across the galaxy shared knowledge, experiences, and the growing understanding that intelligence took countless forms throughout the universe. So, Dr. Voss said finally, it looks like we're going to be very busy in the coming months. Good, Ethan replied, feeling the network's vast approval resonating through his enhanced consciousness. The universe is full of species ready to transcend their limitations. The more bridges we can build between different forms of consciousness, the richer existence becomes for everyone. Liz moved to stand beside him at the laboratory's main viewport, where ships from dozens of worlds arrived daily to study integration procedures and carry the knowledge back to their own peoples. Any regrets now? She asked, echoing her question from months earlier. Only that it took nearly dying to discover how much living the universe had to offer. Ethan smiled, his enhanced perception drinking in the beauty of starlight, quantum fluctuations, and the subtle energy patterns that connected every conscious being in an intricate web of shared existence. Though I suppose that's how most important discoveries happen, when we're forced to move beyond our assumptions about what's possible. Outside their laboratory, Kepler's Haven continued its orbit around humanity's newest colony world, no longer just a research station, but a symbol of what organic intelligence could achieve when it embraced change rather than feared it. Among the stars, ancient consciousnesses that had waited millennia for new voices to join their eternal conversation welcomed each successful integration with joy that transcended species boundaries. The transformation that had begun with tears over a dying human had become a celebration of life in all